Hiya, my name is Kacie Pallan. I'm a student at the University of Wyoming, doing my senior year right now in marketing and graphic design at the same time. But today I'm going to be teaching you guys how to hand letter with Crayola markers, and we're going to translate that into a postcard craft you can send to your family and friends during this crazy time. So stay tuned. So some things you're going to need for this project are some lined paper to do some initial practice on, or some computer paper if that's what you prefer, Crayola markers. You can use either these fat little guys, or another good option is to get the super tips if you have those around. If you have like a sibling or something you can thief some markers from. And then a pair of scissors for later, and some rigid paper like cardstock or watercolor paper. I'm using watercolor paper, you can use cardstock, whatever you have laying around is fine. So before we start our actual project, we're going to go through some of the basics of Crayola calligraphy / brush calligraphy. Now the main thing to focus on when we're doing any kind of calligraphy is that the thing that makes calligraphy is a difference in the thickness of the line. We want a thin upstroke and a thick downstroke. And that's the basis for the whole sort of scheme. We're wanting contrast in our letters. So the first thing to do is to take your Crayola pen and see what it does. How thin can we go? How little pressure can we apply and still draw a smooth line? And we want to do the same with the thickness. How thick can we press down? How thick can we get this line? The rule of thumb with calligraphy is thin upstrokes, thick downstrokes, every time. It's called pen logic. So, these are some strokes you want to practice, your just thin ups and your thick downstrokes. And other things you also want to practice are the sort of beginning strokes to a letter, like this one. So we're just going to keep going with that for a little bit. Definitely this is a time to bust out some lined paper if you have it around. I used all mine up on previous takes, so we're just going to roll with this right now. That's all right. And then another good thing to practice are your U shapes and your mountain shapes. You can get both of them in at the same time. Oop. And we're trying to keep a little bit of a consistent slant. That's another thing you want to sort of drill while you're doing these. And also notice that the transitions between my thick downstrokes and my thin upstrokes, I've started to taper off the thickness near the bottom right here. That's important for avoiding something we call soggy bottoms, which will decrease your contrast, your nice contrast that we're looking for when we're making these letters. And so you're going to want to drill these for a little bit until you get more comfortable with your pen. And in a second, we're going to write some words. Some more strokes to get comfortable with while we're drilling, right before we start writing words, are your oval shapes using your same thin, thick logic. So we're going to go down thick and thin up, down thick, thin up. That one started a little not as good, but that's all right. Down thick, thin up. And then your lowercase f's, just the top part, just to get this transition, just to get a feel for these loops is good. I'm working on a textured table, that's why we're getting some of these ridges, but in case you're wondering. And then your lowercase j shapes, we're just trying to get familiar with the loops, keep a consistent slant. Definitely do this on lined paper if you have some around. Now, this shape can also translate into some beginning letter shapes, and I'll just write some of the alphabet for you to show how it translates. This is the beginning bowl of an A or a D, anything like that. So your lowercase a, you'll notice, is just about the same shape. We started in a little bit of a different spot, but the thin, thick logic still applies. And then this is the downstroke from earlier, from over here, with a little tail. Most letters are just a combination of these shapes. There are some that are minor exceptions, but these are some good shapes to just get your hand used to making. Lowercase b. Saw this from earlier, and the bottom. Now we can make an F in a different way with the full loop on top, and in fact that's a more traditional way to do it. But there's no hard and fast rules for how your letters have to look in this style. No one's gonna come around and grade you, and in fact there's a lot of different cursive fonts online that you can use as exemplars for when you're practicing your own. And you might find a different way to make one of these letters than you thought of before. That's what happened. I always thought when I was first learning that cursive Bs could only ever be like this. And I was wrong. Because it can also be like that. They totally can. As long as you put a little loop at the end and it can connect to something else. It is totally allowed. But there are multiple ways to do things. So, you find the way that fits best for you. We're going to do some uppercase letters from a different part of the alphabet. We'll do L, M, and O, because those are interesting. You'll notice this from the F shape from earlier. Right? You also notice that I'm picking up my pen between strokes sometimes. Don't feel like you have to keep your pen on the paper the entire time. This isn't traditional cursive in the way that they're focused on fluency for speed. We're focused on taking our time and making sure our strokes look really nice and legible, making sure our slants are in place. This isn't a speed contest, it's just a patient contest, patient process. We can do an N similar to the M. In fact, this isn't an alphabet I use all the time. I definitely change the shape of my letters depending on what purpose they're for. So, let's do some words, shall we? I have enough paper here. Whoop. Grab some. When we're practicing words, I'm going to switch markers. When we're practicing words, a thing to keep in mind is we want to keep a consistent slant. Like I was talking about earlier, it's just good across the board to keep that consistent slant. Now, once you learn to do that consistent slant, you can start messing it up. You can start bopping stuff around and being a little bit more funky with it at your leisure, but when we're first learning, we want to keep sort of a good slant. It helps with legibility. So, we'll write. One of the calligrapher's favorite words to practice is minimum, so we'll start with that. Because it has lots of these little Humpty Dumpty strokes. And that's a good practice in keeping your slant sort of consistent. You'll see that I went a little off the rails at the end here, but that's all right. And we'll write another word. We'll just write postcard, because that's what we're making. Another thing to think about when you're writing letters in a sequence, when you're writing words, is to see where you can add sort of little fun touches that really make it sort of pop. And that ending tail on the D is one of those spots. Definitely don't feel like you have to write as fast as I do. I've been doing this for a while. It's better when you're first starting out, definitely, to go a little bit more slow and deliberate. And sometimes I should honestly go a little bit more slow and deliberate. But if we'll just practice these, practice your upstrokes, practice your downstrokes, practice these shapes, practice some alphabet shapes, get a real handle on the pen, and get comfortable with it. After we do that, then it's time to move on and start making our first craft. So moving on, I'm assuming you've practiced up. I'm hoping you maybe paused the last part of the video and practiced a little bit, or just watched this part and then didn't do this craft until you've practiced a little bit more, because honestly, the most meditative and relaxing thing about brush lettering is just getting lost in the letters and getting lost in practice sheets, and then you look up and you just scribble on a ton of paper and it all looks pretty. Some of it prettier than others, you know, but we are all just learning and it's okay. So for the postcard, I have a sheet of watercolor paper that I've already sort of cut almost to letter paper size. You'll see it has some edges, but we are gonna cut this into a postcard. So your standard US postcard is about 4 by 5. That was incorrect. It's like 3 by 5, 2.5 by 5, whatever. You get the gist. We're gonna cut this in 4s. We're gonna cut this in 4s, and then we're gonna use one of these sheets as our little postcard. And definitely save the rest for later, because you're gonna wanna draw on more things. That's just how it happens. That's how I started. You just start and you just can't stop. Now this is kind of a small postcard, but guess what? Small is good too. We like it. We like it a lot. Now, one thing you're gonna wanna do, especially as you're just getting started lettering, it's hard to keep a consistent baseline unless you're working on ruled paper or something with a line on it. You'll have a problem with floating letters. A lot of people have a problem with that. I had a huge problem with that when I started. You'll start lettering in one spot, and then your letters will just up and away, and you'll be on a slant, and they'll just go off the page, and you don't even know where you started or where you ended up. So one way to remedy that is to lay down a guideline. So we're gonna do that really quick. We're gonna take one of these sheets that I've already cut because I don't have a ruler around right now. And I'm gonna do mine at an angle just for some visual interest, but you can do yours wherever you want. So this is just a mechanical pencil. And we're just gonna draw a line right there. Yeah, that's good. Now I'm gonna use the super tip for this one because I haven't showed you guys the difference. This has got a way smaller tip, but with that, you also will be able to make your letters way smaller, so it'll be helpful. And you can do some fun sort of scroll work on the side. So this postcard is gonna go to my Nana, and so we're just gonna tilt to where the line is somewhere that you can write with, and we're just gonna go up thin and then pressure down and then up thin and then pressure down. And I actually want probably the lowercase letters to go a little higher than this guideline. This is a good guideline for my first capital, but I think I want the rest of it to go a little higher. And thankfully enough, we've done this in pencil. So we're flexible and we can just erase later any little pencil mistakes. So we're just gonna go right up here. Now we're gonna go up thin and pressure, up thin, pressure down, up thin, pressure down. And we're just gonna keep going until we finish the word. Now, I like to do, I don't like to keep everything by the book as far as letters go. We want some little flourishes, some little interesting details. And I'll just hang off the bottom. So the descending part of the N is a really good place to do that. The Y's are good candidates for those little floofy things. Bottoms of F's. There are a lot of interesting places where you can add little curly cues in the letters. And the important thing is just to keep it natural. You don't want to force a letter to sort of go somewhere it doesn't want to go. And you'll be able to see that in your compositions. You'll be like, oh, I tried to force that curly cue, but it doesn't really look like that's where the letter wanted to go. So in those things, you'll definitely learn with time. So don't stress about it, but that's something to pay attention to. And we're gonna finish. So now that says Nana. And now we're gonna add just some fun details. So now you can just draw whatever you want in sort of the margins of the postcard. This is where we wanna, get creative, add some little details. I'm not gonna film the entire process of me doing this, but another thing that's fun to do sometimes is to take your little fun descending strokes and continue them into a little bit of a flourish. That's pretty. We'll just add some stuff like that and stuff that just adds accents to your letters. Starbursts are always fun. I like to do those in my work a lot. These little hearts because this is going to my Nana and I love her. And other little things like that are good to add. And we can even get like fun and illustrative with it. You can add little people, little houses, little things that are meaningful to you. I'm gonna turn the camera off, add a couple more, and then we're gonna come back and talk about it. So we've gone a little patriotic with the colors, unintentionally, but I mean, it matches my stamps. So we're just gonna roll with it. So we're gonna address the back now. So for a postcard, we're gonna have a line just about here. That will be for the address on this side. And the stamp will go there. And then you're gonna want to write your message over here. So we're gonna take our straight edge that we worked with before, our piece of extra paper, and just where we put that line, take one of the colors that we used on the front. I'm gonna do blue because, it's fun. Try to make sure that's semi-straight and just throw that line right there. And look, I was off, but that's all right. So, just gonna erase our pencil line, and then this is where the stamp goes. I'm going to write my Nana's address right here. I'm not gonna do it on camera, but then you're gonna wanna put your message over here. Now, this is another good place to sort of practice some calligraphy, but it'll be at a smaller scale. So you might just wanna go in with your normal pen and just write something special. But practice your cursive at the same time, because it's always important to practice your cursive when you're learning calligraphy. Now we're gonna put a stamp on just to show how much room I have to write my address later. And there you have it. There's your hand-lettered postcard ready to send out to your loved one with a message, a little joke, a little goof. Maybe put some stickers on yours. If you have some glitter glue, that would be fun also. Honestly, anything you have hanging around just to make it a little prettier is welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have any calligraphy questions, you can always hit me up on Instagram at Kacie. I'll write it down. Kacie Marie design. That's my Instagram. And you can definitely ask me questions there. Private message me. I'm always open to answer anyone's questions. Thanks for joining me. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week.